You know, I like this location to record a lot. It only has one drawback, and that is the traffic noise that you hear back there. However, in my daily life, at this point anyway, there is not a lot of places I can go, even sometimes on the weekends, but definitely during the week, where I can be outside and record. And for that matter, being inside and recording is sometimes problematic, which I imagine you've come across if you've ever tried such a thing. So, if I re-record this eventually in a different location, take this topic again, it will be because I have found a quieter place to do it. So I have joined the cast of a play, having complained about being overbooked in life. You may be wondering what in the world I'm thinking, and so am I sometimes. But the fact of the matter is, I need to earn some money, and I also need to get out and perform, because I start losing my marbles more than usual whenever I don't perform at all. So here we are. It's a little play. It pays, not a lot, but it pays. It takes up a fair bit of my time, partly for memorizing, although less than you might imagine, for reasons we'll get into in just a moment. And it is a lot of fun because of what I'm doing, and the people I'm doing it with work great. For a play, you have to memorize lines. Now, people will often approach memorization as sort of a brute force thing. They go to the start, they get the first line, they memorize it, go over and over it until it's memorized, and they go to the next one and memorize it. And after they've done a few of these, they'll go back to the beginning of whatever section they've been working on and see if they've got it, and then try to smooth it out from there. Other people, you go a different route with it. They will either read through or record and listen to the thing over and over again. And I have to say that has a certain amount of merit to it. It will help get the structure of the thing in your head. But as regards actually nailing down individual lines, there is a much more effective and quick way to do it that I recommend for anytime you need to memorize something sequentially. Basically, if you have a line, it's just a couple of lines, do that, call that as a bite. This is the section that you can memorize at one go, and then move on. But I recommend doing it backwards. I don't mean each individual line, I mean the whole thing. The idea is this: you have your set of lines, right? Your scenes. You can even do this with the entire show, which I have done and continue to do because it works so well. For each scene, memorize your last line. Look at it, go over it, get it in your head thoroughly. Say, look at it, say it to yourself aloud if necessary and possible. It's hard to do this in a coffee shop without disturbing the other patrons, but memorize it, look away from it, repeat it to yourself a couple of times, look back, make sure you've got it correct, and do that with the last line in the scene. Then move back a line and do exactly the same thing with that, and then go and then run both of those in your head. Look away from it and do your second to last line, the cue for your final line, and then your last line. Now, why would you do it this way? Well, if you've ever tried memorizing things before in the usual way, you start at the beginning and go along. Whenever you start running through them, which you should do pretty much after every line or so, or after every whatever it is in the sequence. It may not be a play, it may be something else, but when you start going through them, you'll start with the one that you know best, no problem, and you get the one that you know next best, and then so on, and pretty soon you're sort of swimming into the stuff that you've just memorized a few moments ago, and you don't know nearly as well as the other stuff. So you guarantee you got the other stuff, and you push. It feels like you're pushing into mud at the bottom of a lake. Is what it really feels like to me. Which I don't know if you've tried before, but it's not a lot of fun. Certainly not a lot of fun when it comes to your memorization, to anything involving your memory. So do it the other way around. That way, whenever you're running through it, you're starting with the thing that you just did and reinforcing it right away, and then the thing that you did just before that, which you have less chance of remembering than the previous one, given the same amount of time between. But then you hit that, and so on, and it actually gets easier as you go through it, and you're eventually in the clear, reinforcing the things that you had memorized to begin with. This is not dissimilar in concept, if somewhat different in practice, to the Pimsleur language way of doing things, where they will work on something in particular and then go off to something else, and later on will refresh your memory on it in ever increasing amounts. It works exactly the same way, but a lot more condensed in this case. So, as an example, well, I should probably mention first that this also works not only with the entire scene, but you'll also find it to be a very handy thing if you happen to have a long line, if you have a monologue. And in using this technique, I have been able to memorize any number of Shakespearean monologues. I say Shakespearean, some of them are Shakespeare. I've done Johnson. I have some Shaw, and there's a few different ones. I have even some Moliere coming, which is really weird to memorize because it's a translation. Moliere wrote in French, and whenever you translate things, you're in some ways writing them again, and some of the word choices come across oddly depending on the translation involved. But we'll talk about more that sort of thing more another time. For now, let's have a look at a very short Shakespearean monologue right here. See how short it is. As opposed to, this is from Macbeth. Sorry, the Scottish play. The famous Tomorrow speech by Macbeth. The whole idea, in fact, of cadence, like iambic pentameter, or the iambs in particular, is to help you be able to know where you are, to remember what word comes next, because it more easily suggests itself. The same reason that poetry uses meter. The thing is that memorizing it by line can get really weird, because the meter will cause the lines to break very often in the middle of a phrase or a thought, and it's not real handy as far as that goes. So while it's useful for recovering the lines from your memory, it isn't necessarily easiest for memorizing it in the first place, because it helps for us to take it in conceptual bites instead of rhythmic ones. So the last essentially two lines of the thing is this: it is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And if that's a little long, go with the break caused by the commas. I am told that commas were originally put in to instruct actors where to breathe, and grew from there into a grammatical thing. Whether or not it's true doesn't matter, because we can use it for our own non-grammatical purposes. So let's look at the very last few words: full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. All right, once we have that in our head, we look away. Full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. I know, not very impressive, right? Wait till you get more of it. It is a tale told by an idiot. Okay, we got that part. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Well, that was pretty easy. I realize also we're still on a very small thing, but you might also be understanding right away exactly how much easier it is to do it this way. Let's take the first part of that third to last line there. And then is heard no more. And then is heard no more. And then is heard no more. the I Ams help on that one, don't they? And then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. These sorts of things become much easier once you begin to understand exactly what they mean, which for modern stuff may or may not be a problem. For the older stuff, can be a bit of a challenge. But I mean, if you do Johnson, his English is not quite the same as Shakespeare's, in spite of the fact that they lived at exactly the same time, I think. I hope I didn't get that wrong. Anyway, they're both of the same period, and Shakespeare's English is closer to what ours is because he effectively invented it. Again, a topic for another time. Actually, there's a whole book on the subject if you want to go see. Alright, back we go. Where are we? And then it is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Alright. And then it is heard no... It's the beginning of a line, but not the beginning of a sentence. Let's go back a bit. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It flows very easily. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Alright, piece of cake. And we just work our way back and back with this sort of thing until we have the entire thing. I won't do the whole thing now, the whole memorization now. You get the idea though. What you'll find eventually is that aside from being able to get it in your head very quickly this way, you'll find that certain other, let's see if I can find one here, there's certain other dialogues or monologues, more importantly, in this case, have segments sort of built into it. Understanding the sections and then understanding the flow is very much like putting together a sentence in your head before you say it. You may not even think about how you're doing that, but if you have any speaking skills, or at least speaking skills better than mine, you will be doing it probably automatically. So that is effectively how you can get through a very long monologue. There's a particular rambling one from Hamlet, in which the most tedious character in all of Shakespeare is actually explaining how he's going to not be tedious. And that actually has various topics that you go through, and that's the easiest way to remember something that takes a couple of pages. And these sorts of things become much easier that way. So start at the end, memorize it, and then move back a little bit, memorize that, and then work through those, and instead of pushing into mud, you feel like you are reinforcing something you've just done, which you are, and then moving into the clear. And in doing so, you will reinforce everything exactly as much as it needs to be, and your memorization process will go a whole lot faster. Believe me.